This is the Team Performance Podcast, where we explore issues at the heart of leadership, team development, and organizational culture. I'm your host, Mark Gilroy, and in this episode, we're joined by James Denny from Sales Geek. Together, we talk about ways to help teams connect in a post-lockdown era, how to avoid a culture of apathy, and the best way to utilize data to take teams on a journey of change. Right, welcome to the latest episode in our series of interviews. I'm very happy to be joined today by James Denny. James is a director and a strategy geek at Sales Geek and is actually listed on the company as the dove from above, which we will definitely talk about. But first, welcome, James.
Well, it's really great to see you, Mark. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
And before we get into some of the other things that we're going to talk about, this second series of the podcast is all about focusing on teams. And I wanted to kick off by asking you about what's been the most memorable team that you've ever encountered.
So good question. So encountered versus managed, slightly different things, I guess. So I think from memory, for me anyway, teams that last in your memory, as in you have fond memories of. So if I think back to my BT days, I was a general manager of all the UK calls lines infrastructure. Well, I don't know, I had about 200 field guys, 600 desk guys working to me. And one of those teams was a specialist division, about 30 of them in there. They were, I hate to use the dreaded word consultants, but we were consultants back in that day. And they were just great. And I think they were hardworking, they were diligent, they were knowledgeable, and what stood out from them, and I'm still friends with them today. I left BT, 15 years ago, and I'm still friends with a number of them today. They were passionate about what they did. And when that kind of bleeds through people, that lives long in the memory. So out of all of my teams that I've managed, and I've managed nearly 6,000 people over the last 30 odd years. That's a number. That's the team that still, I could tell you who all their names were. And I think that tells you what you need to know about a team.
And what is it about that passion that you think made it special? Was it about passion for the thing that they were doing at the time? Was it about just generally carrying an air of passion with them?
I think there's many aspects to that. I think for me, if I look at them and I think back to the likes of Paul Baines, I think to Pravin Patel, and I think to the other guys. Yeah, they had a passion for the product, they had a passion for their company and stuff like that, but they just wanted to do the right thing by the client. They would just loved sitting in front of customers, doing the thing that they did in front of customers, and customers loved them for it. And I think that was that's hard to find in most businesses, let alone in that sort of thing. It's a tough thing to get to that. Customers got to love it, and you and all that sort of stuff, but they just genuinely enjoyed solving the challenges that they used to go out and solve for clients. So yeah, I think that's where the passion comes from. But yeah, they liked the job and all the rest of it, but yeah, they had a genuine joy for sitting in front of clients.
Yeah, it's so interesting that, isn't it, that you think that would be a common sense kind of quality or something that most teams would have, but actually it's really, really rare. I used to work with a team where almost by accident, everybody in that group had come to the organization through the service industry.
Right.
And as a result, there was this really enormous kind of emphasis on getting everything right for the customer, never quite being able to do enough for them. And they were really well known for it, actually. It became a real, a USP that it was whoever you speak to will probably solve your problem because they really care about doing it. And it's something I've always taken with me. I think it's very contagious. When you get a couple of people like that in a team, it spreads through everyone really quickly.
Yeah, it can be. There's a good old. It's not the Hertzberg's principles, but I love the old triangles, right? So we live in a world. Well, certainly Sales Geek does, where we, as part of our educational programs and empowerment programs, we bring people to that enlightenment of how psychology works in sales and leadership and all the rest of it. When it comes to why people expect what they expect from us, there's that triangle of capability. And we were doing a session on this actually yesterday at one of our quarterly meetings. And so big shout out to Sue Brockhurst for this. And you can chat to Sue at any time if you want to get more information on that. But she talks about a triangle that says there's two basic layers that we tend to deliver at all stages from an employment. If we contextualize this and put it employment roads, there's two things that we have to always bring, and that is knowledge and process. And knowledge and process creates a day job, right? That's the thing you just do. Whether you're in a services industry, telecoms, whether you work for Sales Geek or whatever, you have a knowledge and skills base, which is the thing, the process, the tool, the technology or whatever it is we're working with. Then there's the process, there's the moving the things from left to right, etc. And no one thanks you for doing the day job. It's an expectation. And so it should be. That's what you're trained and paid for. It's what the salary provides and all that sort of stuff. And then over and above that, what we're trying to create at that point is the pinnacle of that triangle, which is why anyone and everyone and every human in modernity has ever bought anything ever. Lots of evers in there. And it's because of the emotional connection that we finally make with that thing, whatever it is. Whether you're buying a house, a new telephone, a car, Sales Geek product or service, you have to emotionally connect to that. And you do that through a number of psychological steps. One of those is creating an impact, and you build trust, you build connection, and all those sorts of things. So for a lot of people, they get that process and the technical side of things. They can do the day job, but the bit above that, where you're starting to create the impact, trying to connect the connection, the trust, the connectivity, the empathy, the eventually why people trust you and then buy from you, etc., as long as you're solving problems, all those sorts of things. That's hard, and we see it so deficient in many people that we engage with today, and I see it across the board, which is partly why I think sometimes it gives sales a bit of a bad name. But that whole top of the triangle piece, that whole empathy, connection to the empathy side, is what ultimately makes us engage in something, whatever the something is. That's what creates that engagement. And you see a lot of leaders deficient in that. You see a lot of companies and businesses deficient in that. So when you get teams and individuals and people that the day job at the two lower parts of that triangle are just in the subconscious, and they overemphasize that top of that triangle stuff, that's where great things happen, and you just don't see enough of it.
I remember when I first started working in the L&D industry, it was really common to take teams into really unusual places, like, I don't know, on yachts and out into the middle of the Lake District and for weeks at a time and try. And I think behind that was the idea that you could throw a group of people together, and if you put them in any situation where there was some kind of adversity and common struggle, common enemy, however you want to frame it, that emotional connection would kind of happen. And then you could build from there. So as a trust building, it was always often team building, but that's that's kind of very broad now. But I don't know how in sort of contemporary teams, what sort of things people do to help foster that kind of connection and that emotional relationship between.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think certainly there's two narratives behind that: pre and post pandemic, probably. And I think post pandemic, we might be starting to lean back more towards the pre-pandemic sort of era of those things. But if you take, there's lots of facets that go into it, not least so things like social media, our ability to connect via technology. We have a more disparate and dispersed workforce. You don't always have to be connected in the same office. And that comes with pros and cons. Having people disparate, it's fine, it's flexible, there's more empowerment, more engagement, get more done, all of those sorts of buzzwords for positivity. But I often find the downside to that is it can, and I think demonstrates, it constrains connectivity, constructive empathy, growth pathways between individuals, connection to things, and things are not just the individuals, but back to your brand, your company, your thing that you do, the customers you serve, etc. So there's a balancing act, I think, that businesses are trying to adjust to and are striking a bit of a balance within now that says we need to be together more. And I used to be a fan on and off of the old team building things, depending on what you do. You've got to have the mindset for it, right? You've got to know, then you've got to embrace it. You've got to have your heart and mind open to go and do those sorts of things. And I find that here for us, for Sales Geek, post-pandemic, we have quarterly meetings. We've just had all the geeks up here yesterday, hence why the triangle was so fortuitous, because Sue took us through a bit of that yesterday. It's just great to have people there. There's the culture, the feeling, the empathy, giving everyone hugs. You can't do that on Zoom, all right? And you just get that bit done. And the other thing that happened, interestingly, yesterday, we had 20, 30 of the guys in, we got a ton of business done. which was really bizarre. Side issues, side hustles, things, just people diving in and out, having a chat about this. Can you help me with this? Can you solve this? How do we do this? How do we do that? Whatever. There was a ton of groundsway of positive energy and activity done. And by the end of yesterday, people left the building. There was no team building exercises. We didn't do anything. It was our quarterly meeting, cakes and stuff for lunches and things like that. And maybe a few beers, and bowling. Can't really go into any more than that. But everyone left with a really positive, upbeat, internal feeling. Whereas we then carry on our monthly sessions together, and they'll be on Zoom because it's practical. Everyone's up and down the country and around the world, so this medium is great. And they'll be buzzing off it for the next couple of sessions. But I think for organizations and for people that are going to do it for 12 months and more, you're going to lose a connection. And it's that connective tissue between how people feel and embrace you, your company, your culture, your things, is something you have to build upon. And you can only really build on it face to face, whether you're doing team building, taking them out for beers, I don't know, whatever the thing is, but do it face to face.
Yeah. I've also come around to that way of thinking. I was a huge proponent of working from home for a long time. And yet I think the quality of a relationship, particularly within a team, is often as good as the last time you saw each other in person. It's this very slow erosion that happens over time. It happens more with distance, so long distance relationships, it's probably more pronounced. But, even if you're working in the same city as somebody, but you haven't seen them in person for some time, it's this cup that needs topping up constantly.
Yeah.
And that cup is filled with kind of trust and understanding and all of those little nuances that come with the kinds of things that you can only discuss with somebody when you're in person.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of teams are starting to come around to that that understanding. I think we're seeing at the moment in the news, there's been lots of reports of organizations, I think probably the darker side of that with like organizations like PwC, where they're looking at monitoring people where they are in a bid to try and get them into the workplace and keep them there. But actually behind that, I think there are some good intentions that we are beginning to understand now that post-pandemic, there are some downsides towards having a completely remote workforce that can lead to some performance issues.
Yeah, you definitely see it. And we see it a lot at Sales Geek when we go into organizations and we do our part-time sales director services and other things that we might do. We often encounter that whole disparate workforce scattered across different organizations and stuff. And we have to remember that whilst it's a tool, home working, and some people say it's a privilege, it's not, or whatever your arguments are for those things, it is a tool to enable maximum performance. It is not the only thing that you can or should be doing. And we have to remember that we're playing with people at the end of the day, and everyone responds differently. I can work from home. I am terrible at it. I have too many distractions, not least my dog. And if I'm working from home and he knows I'm working from home, I am mugged by him on a regular basis. And he's very difficult to say no to. So he'll sit on my lap, and then before I know it, 10 minutes have gone by. We've had a proper snooch. And I'm like, dude, you got to get off now. I've got work to do. I've got emails to be sending. And he'll get off me for like maybe 40 minutes, and then he's back. Like, Dad, need another 5 minutes. I need more attention. He's a very attention-seeking dog. And you can get distracted, right? And everyone has different distractions. Whereas I think in an office, I am way more productive, interactive. The team are right there. They are literally outside this glass door right now. We can interact and do stuff. But there are times, well, I have to be at home. So a great example, this week, actually. Sorry, I spent all of Tuesday or Wednesday at home, because I had to write a very detailed legal contractual document for one of our products. And I just don't need distractions, because that's the downside sometimes being in an office, is the consistent distraction. All the can I. One of the things on the distraction side, give you a top tip actually, something I learned a while ago. I saw it in a company and I really liked it. So they had an office, open planned office with the dividers down the middle, quite a lot of people in there, etc. But on the divider at the top, they had a coloured brick, triangle brick, and it had three sides to it with three colours, red, amber and green. And all the user did, the person that sat at the desk, was they turned the rec over. So if it was green, they were like, yeah, you can come distract me, you can ask me a question, tap me on the shoulder, you can do whatever. If it was amber, I might be coming into something, going out of something, only bother me if it's urgent. If it was red, don't touch me because I'm doing stuff and whatever. And since the company implemented it, and I believe it's a common thing, there's a lot of companies that try and do it. I do like it. It is not transformed, but it has changed the way that interruptions might happen in that space. Because it's my only frustration of working here in an office is I'll sit at my desk over there, and everyone just comes and taps me on the shoulder. Can I just ask you? And then you're trying to head down, and you're like, ah. So occasionally I do work from home, but I'm no good at it.
Yeah, that's a nicer situation than the last team I worked with, who did it with headphones. So a lot of them had brought these kind of really nice, expensive noise cancelling headphones, and that was the sweetener of, we'd love to get you back in the office, please. The conditions are, if you see someone with these headphones on, they are actually blocking out the noise because they don't want to be distracted.
Yeah.
But there's probably some unsent messages in doing that. And some people were just forgetting to take them off because it was so nice to being in this lovely kind of noise cancelled environment.
Yeah, I do know it. I do see it. I'm not a fan of it purely for that very specific reason. I think my observations of that is people put the headphones in and then they just don't take them out or don't take them off. And I won't lie, if I had them in, I wouldn't take them out and I wouldn't take them off. It's just one of those things, right? Headphones, so they're naturally comfortable. You've got a decent set of headphones. You listen to the music. I don't know, whatever it is you've got on in the background, but you don't take them off, and therefore no one knows if they can do something, and it becomes more of a distraction because they're on than it is because they were off.
Yeah.
So everyone's got to find their happy medium with those sorts of things. But as a personal thing, and I might get some hate from that, and I do apologise to everyone that loves a good old headphone, I'm not a fan of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses, they're still just finding their way through this stuff, and I think the idea of a traffic light system is great. It's really practical. It's very clear to communicate it, and if people are happy to respect that kind of boundary, then fantastic. It's a really good way of deploying it.
I like the fact that companies are trying. That is a sign of progress.
Yeah.
The fact that someone is willing to try ways, whether it's the right way or the wrong way, your people, your teams, the management, the company, your customers combined, you'll all work it out, but try something. Don't just be old school anymore. We don't live in an old school environment for anything. I don't think in anything in society anymore. Everything is now open for challenge and debate. Try things. And good leaders, good managers, good companies, good workforces will embrace as an element of consistent change. You've got to go careful how much change you apply and in what levels, because that comes with resistance to itself, as we know. But don't be afraid to have a go. And when you find that happy medium mix, people will embrace it.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to one of our earlier episodes with a PCS practitioner called Dolly, and she was talking about that in the context of leadership, and her analogy was like we were all falling down a cliff and kind of grasping on for little sort of tufts of grass along the way, saying, is that leadership? Oh, no, that's not it. That's just falling out. Is that leadership? No, that's it. And it's the same thing at the team level of kind of just figuring out massive existential questions like, what even is a team these days? What is the purpose of a team? What is the purpose of an office? What is work? These are huge questions that companies are really wrestling with.
You can probably zen yourself out with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are. We just kind of go, well, is it that? Is it that? Maybe it is. But you're right. It's about experimentation and being curious about it and finding out what works for your group.
Yeah.
One of the things I was really curious to know, because I know that in your work, you outsource the kind of expert sales functions and you help companies access that, but also you work with sales teams and help them improve their work. Over the years, what have you found have been some really kind of key features of really high performing sales teams? If you had to kind of condense that down into kind of qualities, behavior, skills, what do you see coming through in the teams that really excel?
So this is going to be a very personal response, as in James's response. I think there are lots of books written about different things and you can get lots of different concepts about what that might be. But for me personally, discipline. And discipline is a very important part of all business. It is a super important part of leadership and sales teams. And what I mean by discipline, I don't mean everyone is disciplined and it's a disciplined area that you work in, but you are you are super conscious that you have things you need to do, that you have to fulfill. For example, and anyone from a sales background listening to this, they're going to be going tut tut now. Eyebrows are all going to be going in the air. But I'm going to say the words. And you're all wondering, oh, what are the words, James? What are the words? CRM are the words, for example. Right? But it's only one of the examples. So there's two sides to that whole CRM thing. Number one, it has to be fit for purpose. And that we see a lot in businesses, that it just isn't fit for purpose. It's not created the right way. It's not developed the right way. It has the wrong formulas in it. It doesn't drive the right processes. And there's a difference between sales process and sales methodology. Neither two are coupled together. All of those things it's wrong, right? It's broken in many areas. So therefore, it doesn't drive the right motivation. However, good discipline says it's set up the right way, and then there is a personal discipline within it to work within the confines of those systems. So that is a really important part. Coming back to that triangle, process and knowledge, you've got to do the day job, right? You've got to do the day job. And that's a really hard part for creative salespeople, because nobody likes to be in the mundane. Everyone likes to chase the shiny and do the thing and go after this and all the rest of it. So working with salespeople, that actually is a natural challenge, and making people understand that and working with them to develop them that's hard. But cultivating a minimum viable discipline, whatever the disciplines are, like systems and process and things like that. So everyone has to be bought into that. Everyone has to have that flow through DNA. So that's a really important part for me. And without that level of base layer discipline, whatever makes that discipline up for you and your company and your sales team, the rest of it won't function anyway, because the basics just aren't there. So you've got to have that. Secondly, I think for me, this is going to be controversial. Most of my responses are controversial, Mark, I think. But
Bring it on. We're good.
This a lot, all right? And we see this a lot in organization. And it's something around mindset. And I'm not sure how to put this out there, but there is a bigger mindset now that we see in business, where salespeople and certain sales leaders, maybe, and certain business owners have a mindset in the 2020s where, I don't know, things like bonuses, cars, stuff for them, whatever all that stuff is, it's an expectation. They should have these things, whatever it is. And there's an over-reliance in over-reliant things, whatever those things might be. And if you see that in an organization where it's a give to take model, it drives apathy. And once you drive apathy in an organization, then it's very difficult to create high-performing, high-peaking organizations. So that mindset of it's me, and I have a responsibility to my team, my department, my company, and myself. And you definitely have to couple the two together. Responsibility to the organization and all the facets of it, but a responsibility to yourself. Because the interesting thing about high-performing teams, and I will speak directly to those teams that think they're high-performing and those that think that they're there or thereabouts. Wherever you are in your career right now, whatever company you work for, probably isn't the only company you're ever going to work for. You might decide to move on, you might get poached, and all those sorts of great things. But that will happen based on your mindset and the way that your worth ethic is generated you to be. And if you want to earn the bigger tickets, earn the bigger items, go to the bigger places, whatever the things of direction of travel that you've got in your mindset, it comes from your past, it comes from your reputation, and it comes from your ethics, morals, and all that sort of great stuff, which builds out our personal reputation and our personal brand. We talk about that a lot, don't we? And if you've got the height of that, then you can craft whatever future you want. If your personal brand and reputation, as seen by others around you, is deemed to be poor or inadequate, it doesn't mean that you won't go places, but you won't go to the places that you really want to go to. And again, that then drives lower performing teams. And the last thing I would say about high performing teams, you get the old skill metrics, you get all those sorts of things around, you get your thirds modern, you get a third of your team high performing, third of your team doing okay, third of the team maybe not doing so great, the old averages, stuff like that. It only takes one person in a great sales team to be the great person, and others tend to follow. You'll get a natural mediocrity in a team. There is always a base layer, depending on psychometric profile, and we're big in Sales Geek on understanding all of that. human psychology nature of people, which is very important to understand the dynamics of high performing teams. But if you've got one person that strives for the best, don't underestimate the power that demonstrates to others to want to go be there too. And if you do that in the right way, get someone demonstrating that in the right way, there's a natural drag effect where they drag part of the business with them. Not all of them, and you're never going to get all of them to go, but you get enough, you get the definition of what a high performing team is to you.
So you might have caught me smiling as you were talking about that apathy piece. And I was smiling because you reminded me of a conversation I had on a train the other day. I don't know if you find this all the time, but if you are sitting on a train without headphones on, people tend to tell you about how much they hate their jobs or their manager or their team or all of the above. It happens to me all the time. And maybe I've got one of those faces. But this chap on the train was telling me about the culture of bonuses in their organisation. I'll leave the organisation confidential for now. But it was such that they pay out bonuses in December. Come what may. Depends on the performance, but pretty much there will always be a bonus payout in December. And this person has been wanting to leave their job all year, but they are waiting until they get past December so that they can collect their bonus and then hand in their resignation in January. And it transpires that this just goes on. People within the team just do this so that there's this huge kind of mass exodus in January, February time where people who've been waiting patiently to collect their bonus payments just leave the organisation. And this has been going on for years. And I said to him, it sounds like there's a bit of a culture of deception there. And he said, oh, yeah, absolutely. But everyone just goes along with it. And I think, that piece of apathy is that, people have just been sat there doing very little with very little discipline just because they know that this is coming and it have almost no effect on their output and their effort. And I thought, crikey. And I asked them at some point, how would you describe the culture? And they were very quick. They just said toxic.
Yeah.
It sounds like it because it's underpinned by deception.
Yeah.
Throughout the business. Very difficult thing to try and unravel and change.
It's a difficult thing. I think the bigger the organisation becomes, well, in my experience of all this, there's a spectrum to toxicity in organisations. So there can be the nature that the bigger the organisation becomes, the more easy it is to say, there's a toxic nature or culture in the business. But toxicity comes from people at the end of the day, right? Cortisol, we talk about it, the negative brainwaves and all those sorts of things. It comes from leadership, ultimately, at the end of the day. Sure, people and teams can behave badly, inappropriately, or whatever, or poor perform. But if you've got the right level of management, leadership, ethics, culture, whatever language you want to wrap it up in, you can take that out of the business. So any organization that has that, like for your example there, where bonuses are paid out regardless at December, and I like that. I do like that there's a December bonus. I always encourage that because December's an expensive time for all human beings, for most of us anyway. So, for a company that is prepared to do that, applaud the company. But you have to recognize that that's company's profits coming out to you. You have to, and I always say to all managers, all leaders, all businesses that I work with is first principles first. If you're going to pay a bonus or a commission to anyone, you have to address the basic principle question: what's your salary for? And if you can't answer what your salary is for, you should not be paying bonuses or commissions because you don't know where the demarcation point lands. And they don't know where the demarcation point lands. And that breeds expectation. And once expectation is set into an organization and expectation is not met, you create toxicity. And then the cycle then starts to breed itself. So you've got to be really clear on the definitions of if there is an over and above, what is the demarcation point? And we always teach companies that you should have 2 KPI standards or OKRs, objective key results, whatever the language you use. So you'll have a KPI stack for the day job. These are the things that you need to do that, 1, keep you in your job, and 2, give you the right to be paid the salary that you are being paid for. That is the KPI stack for that. And then there is the over and above KPI stack, which drives excellence and over and above performance. And by the way, whatever you set, Mr. Company, as the high performance standard of your business is within the salary range. Over and above should mean over and above, right? It shouldn't be, well, we're striving to be over and above and therefore we'll create a a bonus and structure geared to drive that excellence because it's over and above. You're hurting yourself as a company, you're hurting your profits and all those sorts of things, and you're not driving the right mindsets. So, and people need to feel that they've earned that. It's a given thing. And I don't disagree, by the way, that there is a culture in some organizations, and I have seen this in some businesses, where regardless of who you are and what you do and how you do it, at a certain point, like in December, as a good example, if the company's generally hitting certain milestones overall, everyone gets a payout. And I do applaud that. Yeah, crack on. I think that's a great thing. But for those that sit on the front line, that impact numbers should always be able to address what's your salary for. And if you can't answer that, you shouldn't be paying over and above for it.
Yeah, and this is if we're trading controversial takes. My controversial take on the HR buzzword that kind of came out around post-pandemic was around quiet quitting. And I took a really close look at people were talking about that and in a really negative light. And I thought, well, actually, another way of framing quiet quitting is that people were looking at exactly what you're just saying there, James, the expectation piece set and met. If I have met the expectations of my employment contract and I turn up and deliver that, that isn't quiet quitting. That is me meeting the expectations of my employment contract. If you want me to do more, reset the expectations or pay me more. Yeah. And don't complain about the fact that I'm not overachieving. I find that such an odd thing that people got really kind of hooked in on this term to describe the act of somebody turning up and doing their job and nothing more, as if it was a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that is an important statement, that whilst we can say to managers and managers can say back to people, what's your salary for? The managers and the company have to understand what is that expectation in line with it. And if people rock up and do their job and do it well to the expectations that you have set, don't give them a hard time. They're doing exactly what you asked them to do. Crack on with that. And you can reward and motivate and applaud people without having to give financial incentives to that. There's other things within the culture of businesses, the little silly things. We have pastry days and all that sort of great stuff. There's lots of stuff. Everyone will know what those things are and what motivates those people. They're just nice things to do. They're just behavioral aspects, as the behavioral side of good leadership management and culture of a business. But everyone be clear. What's an expectation? And then we should avoid this whole quiet quitting thing, which was, it's been an interesting phenomenon. What is overachievement? I'm working my arse off. I'm working, over and above for nothing. No, set the right expectations, manage and lead to the expectation. I'd like to think we do have a very good culture here at Sales Geek, and I've had that for many time in my businesses in the past. Not always, don't get me wrong. I am not the rounded leader. I think I'm much better today. I'm 57 years old. I'm much better than I was when I was a leader in my late 20s, early 30s. I had that culture of that time, and I won't lie, I did. And it was working every hour that you can, working at the weekends. You were available at the end of the phone. Did all of that stuff, and I expected it of my people too. And I was not happy when it didn't happen. But today it's 9 to 5, right? 5 o'clock, dudes. Get out of here. Yeah. And we're down in the fire pit down below. Get a beer. Crack on, chat about the weekend, and away you go. Yeah. So that balancing act. And have I lost any productivity from anyone? No. Do I still get more done? Yeah. And it doesn't take the world to do these things. It's different ways to motivate different people for different reasons.
Yeah. Parkinson's law, right? Work expands or contracts to fill whatever time you were assigned for it. It makes perfect sense.
It's true.
The other thing that you talked about there was around profiles and data, and particularly psychological profiles. And I think I absolutely have seen this, where the culture of reward in a lot of teams is kind of quite broad brush. I remember going to a kind of company awards ceremony that was delivered by a bank many years ago, and it was like a game show where they were literally kind of calling people's names out and they saying, "Come on down, John, you've won this and this." And some people were really responding very well to that, and they obviously really, their makeup was such that they enjoyed that spotlight on them, and the claps and the cheers and the group reward element. And some people were really not into it at all, and you just got the sense actually they probably would have preferred a quiet word with the CEO and a coffee and a chat about what a good job they'd done, and that would have been what they needed. How do you tend to use kind of profiles and data in your work? How does that come through?
So it's it's a really good subject line, and I think, and a lot of companies have challenged with how to use that type of data. Firstly, you got to get the right data. So data is data for one thing, but you got to get the right data, and you got to get a mix of it. It's not one size fits all. So we're a big fan of psychometric profiling. For us as an organization, we use DISC, and we measure 4 core areas of the human psyche. Well, at psychometric level, not psyche, at the psychometric level. So we measure behavior, which is DISC modeling. We'll measure motivation, what drives us for change. We'll measure acumen, which is partially around EQ and our worldviews, internally and externally. And then we'll measure a competency stack. So that's a human analysis based on a self-assessment. Secondly, we'll use some wraparound data to support that. So we'll do things like 180s, and we call them skills gap analysis. So within that, we will do a series of 20, 30, 40 questions, whatever it is, one-to-one. We'll get them to self-analyze around a criteria based on competency, capability, and confidence. And I'll self-measure myself on those things. And then we'll give exactly the same set of questions to their peers. And we can do that as a 360 as well, and go out and give that to customers as well. But they'll come back and they'll say, we think Mark is and James is, and they'll mark it. And then that forms a secondary piece of data. And then the third piece of data actually use you guys, right? And this is why we work really well together. Using the data that you guys provide at that sort of team level, the dynamic side of things, of how a team revolves around its leader, around the core competencies of management and leader, setting what we would all agree and establish to be the basics of what the foundations of any high performing team should have, how well it's performing, subjective and narrative. And then we take that holistic view of data and we measure the internal and external side of things, of what's going on at a people, systems, process, culture level. And then from that blueprint, we can define remedies and processes and interventions that define how we then might develop a training program, a mentorship program, or whatever the thing is. So we're not going at it in blind. And the most important thing we do with all of that data is we use that data in 2 ways. Number one, take it as a blueprint on day one, and then we run all of those data sets again in 6 months and 12 months to track what's changed, so we can demonstrably show the differences being made by them, through us, or however it ways. And the most important one is we share all the data with the people involved. They've got to buy into what they have seen, because if they can self-assess and analyze gaps, challenges, issues, positives. It's not about gaps as well. It's not about issues and challenges all the time. It's about maximizing the positive side of people, where they're excelling at things. How do you make that better? How do you learn from that thing and apply it over to that thing, whatever that stuff is? And when you start to do all of that, people become really vested in how they make change. And then we tailor all of that to their psychometric profile. So in the instance of DISC, and for all of your listeners that know DISC, if you take the 4 core colors, red, yellow, green, blue, if someone is a high red, for example, the way that they will absorb that data and make that change into themselves or to their organization is going to be different to a green personality. And then we as coaches, mentors, and developers of those personalities will then leverage their personal style to maximize how they will then take that back to the organization. So that's the utilization and the usability of all of that. The key to any of that, though, whatever the data is, your tools, our tools, any tools, whatever the things all are, is the sustainability. How do you take it on a journey over time? How do you embed that for the long-term benefit of you, your teams, your customers, your business? And that's the trick that most organizations miss. They think it's a sheep dip. Yeah, let's buy some reports, get some stuff done, apply some training, do some bits, throw some stuff at a wall. Some will stick, some won't. See what happens. And that's just not the way to do it. You've got to do this over the long term, because everyone learns in a different way. Everyone takes time to absorb that information. But once you get that core data set, you can take the data with them on a journey over time and keep coming back to it as reference points. And when you've got a reference point to look at to go, I was here and now I'm there, then change becomes more sustainable.
Love that. Can you describe any particular team that you've used that whole process with, of all that data gathering and consolidation and curation?
Every team that Sales Geek works with goes through the same rinse. It's part and principle of what we do. There are some teams, don't get me wrong, there are some people that will come to Sales Geek and say, I don't need any of that. I know all that stuff. And you go, no, you don't. And they just want the sheep dip. And to be fair, there's a lot of organizations that Sales Geek has not worked with. And we've just said to the company, no disrespect, but Sales Geek's motto is to change the way the world perceives sales. And to change the way the world perceives sales, there's a holistic approach to that. It's a way leadership looks at that. It's a way salespeople look at themselves. It's the way the customers look at it. It's the way business looks at it. There's lots of things you're going to change in that environment so that we can put professionalism into sales. Sales is a highly skilled profession. When you know your art form really, really, really well, it is a very skilled, very dedicated profession. And we want it to be recognized for that, not the old school way of looking at sales that we've had for many years in the past. And it's through that analysis of data and information done in the right way, in the collective way, that helps drive that change. And I think a lot of companies are more open to that now, more embracing that, but you still get the old school stuff, and there you instantly can tell where culture isn't quite well working and all the rest of it. And you say, right, you're going to need to do all of these data sets because this gives us the rounded picture, and we show them examples of everyone that we've worked with and organizations and what it changes is all demonstrable. And then they go, no. The moment someone says no to any of that stuff, they are not invested in their people. They're ticking a box at the best. They're just trying to get some stuff done. They're trying to see what happens, but they're happy to hit the churn wagon. And, what will be will be minimal investment, maximum churn. We'll see what happens. And we still have a large culture of that right now in UK. But data is everything. Everyone should be using it. Use it.
Got 2 more questions for you, James.
Go on.
So in your bio on the website, you're described as the dove from above. Can you tell us about that? Other than an amazing reference from one of my favourite UK TV shows from the 90s.
So that's where it came from.
Yeah.
So it was one of my colleagues at the time, wonderful lady called Catherine. And it came from a joke initially where she kind of said, you sort of know everything. When we don't know something, we always go to one person, which is me. And you fly in and then you solve a problem or a challenge or you answer a question or whatever. It was because I was the oldest dude around, and therefore the connection was, he's old, he's got some history, he knows stuff, we'll ask him. And I always had an opinion on stuff. And then I think mostly because of my job is the development of our products, our services, our how and what we do when we go to market and how we do all the stuff. So it's fair enough, I know a fair amount of everything that we do. So when people are challenged or stuck, or clients, or they're out in the field, and ours is an open, I'm a director of this business, right? And so you get some companies, they don't talk to me, talk to the training dudes, or talk to this, that, and the other. I want people to come to me. So to any of our franchisees, to any of the employees, to anyone in the organization, all of us have the same open door policy. Not just me, by the way, it's everybody. They just put your hand up, come and ask, because it's about sharing the learning. So the dove from above came from the fact of whenever there was an issue, they went and asked me, and I used to fly down.
They just pull you down.
Yeah, that was literally it. So it was to the point where it got silly, where people would sit in the office and they would go, I knew they were calling me, so I would go over and say, right, what do you want? And then we'd solve a problem, and then they'd go like that, go away. And then I'd bugger off again.
That's perfect.
And it just stuck. I know, silly things, right?
So if people want to come and geek out with you about sales or connection or high-performing teams, anything that we've discussed, how can people find out more about you and what you do?
We're big fans of connecting, so go find us on LinkedIn. It's James Denny. You can follow any of my colleagues, go find Sales Geek as well. So connect on LinkedIn first and foremost. You can always drop me an email, james@salesgeek.co.uk, and come to the website, salesgeek.co.uk, and have a look at what we do. There's a lot of really fascinating things, and if sales is your passion, sales leadership is your passion, sales culture is your passion, we should have a chat.
Super. Thanks so much for joining us, James. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review on your favourite podcast app. Meanwhile, if you're interested to learn more about how the PCS approach can help you explore leadership, performance and culture within your business, get in touch with our team at performanceclimatesystem.com and we'll be happy to help. See you next time with another great guest.